Stick around and I'll show you how I make these really cool handles and cutting boards using this homemade router jig.
Frank does it.
The first thing you want to do is find center. I've already done that off camera. It's this mark here. You want to decide kind of how big you want your finger holes or handles to be. And I like around 4.5 inches. And then you'll want to figure out how much meat you want to leave here too. So let's do 1/2 inch of meat left here and here. And then we'll do like a 4.5 inch handle. So go ahead and mark 2 1/4, 2 1/4 in this direction, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch here, 1/2 inch there, 1/2 inch there. Connect your mark. Give yourself a good line here for this boundary. Same thing over here for this boundary. So to set this up, once I set the jig and router on the cutting board, you see the edge of the router bit? You want to line that up with like this line and then adjust this stop. And then you want to slide your jig over here and you want to line the bit up with this line. And then you do the same thing with these rail guides for these lines. So now that we have our boundaries marked, we'll take the jig and the router and set it on here. It's best if we set our guide rails first. That'll help us keep everything square. So loosen these up. Same thing on this other rail. So now that these are loose, we'll go ahead and we'll move our router bit to where it's just in line with the red line, the red boundary line that's on this side. So okay, so we locked that down. So we got this back rail kind of set. So we'll flip this over. You can see this is the one that we tightened down. So you want to look at your measuring tape here. Make sure that you're in the same at the same measurement on both sides. That'll make sure that this one is parallel. So now we know that we want our handle to be symmetrical on here. So if we are 1.5 inches, we're 1.5 inches away from the center for this rail, we know we can just go ahead and just do the same for this one. So I'll go ahead and adjust this to be 1.5 inches away from the center of the jig. So 1.5 inches. You don't have to use these measuring tapes, but I sure find it to be really nice for setup. It makes it a lot easier. Okay, so now these are all tightened down. We can go ahead and throw it back on the cutting board. So now the reason why I like to lock down these rail guides first is because now I can take the apparatus and push it against the cutting board. So I know that when we adjust the wings will be square to these rails. So now we'll do the same thing, but we'll do it with these wing stops, loosen the hardware, and then we'll take our jig and move it over to where our router bit is right in line with this boundary. And then, so now it is, so you want to make sure you have pressure against this back rail against the cutting board, and then you take your adjustable wing and apply pressure right here and tighten it down. This video is sponsored by Shaper 3D. I actually use Shaper 3D to design this router jig. Check out their new visualization feature that allows you to drop textures and colors on your model quickly and easily without waiting on render speeds. If you'd like to get started with Shaper 3D, there's a link down in the description. Use coupon code FRANK10 at checkout, you can get a 10% discount. So now our boundary, this boundary is protected by this stop, so it can't go any further than this boundary. Now we'll just repeat that over here. Keeping our guide rail touching the cutting board, slide it over to where your router bit is in line with this boundary mark that you made. So now take this wing, push it up against the cutting board, and tighten it down. So now this wing is preventing us from going beyond this boundary line. So these rails prevent us from going past our boundary line this way, and these wings protect us from going beyond our boundary lines in this direction. And then once you have this set up, if you're making the same dimension cutting board all the time, you don't really even need to adjust it. You just throw it on here, I leave my plunge router mounted to this all the time. And then when I have a cutting board, I know that I usually make the same size. I don't have to do all this again. I just grab it. It's already mounted. I throw it on here and I cut them, and that's it. Quick and easy. So I'll flip it this way so you can see what I'm talking about. So I have these little stops right here for my router, but I have noticed that when using this round nose bit, you don't want to go a full step. When you go down, you want to go about a half a step, because the way that this is shaped, if you go too deep, you're going to end up leaving like a ridge in the handle that you'll have to sand off. So you want to just go down a little bit, and that'll carry your contour down perfectly. So with the router running, you want to plunge it to this stop. Obviously, when I'm doing this, I'm going to have it flip the other direction, but I'm just doing this to show you. So how I like to cut them is plunge it in. I like to start kind of not in the middle and not at the very edge, kind of just almost to the edge of your boundary line this way. I grab it like this, and I'm keeping positive control, and so I just kind of slowly move it this way. I'm pulling this direction against this guide rail against the cutting board. That keeps everything straight, okay? So I'm going like this over till I hit this stop. So now I can't go anymore. So now I want to control the jig and slide. Basically, we're wanting to go make like a clockwise rotation. So I'll go ahead and I'm applying pressure here on the cutting board, or on the wing against the cutting board on the edge, to make sure I don't, like, you know what I mean? So, because I want a clean, crisp line this direction. So I'm taking it real easy until I hit the stop of this back rail. Now that this back rail is touching the cutting board going that direction, I'm going to apply pressure that way on the rail, and I'm going to go ahead and continue in my clockwise rotation, maintaining pressure, keeping the whole rail against the whole cutting board the whole time. Okay, so I'm going across and I'm keeping pressure until I hit this stop, okay? So now I'm applying pressure on this wing and I'm pulling the apparatus towards me until I hit this stop on here, okay? So now we can go ahead and start moving back this direction and clear up that little piece that I left, okay? So now that's one pass, and then you want to go ahead and you want to freehand hog out the middle waste. If your handle is wider than the bit itself, obviously you're going to have some waste in the center. So you want to go ahead and get rid of that waste the best you can with the router, you know, keeping control of the jig and everything, okay? So now you got the waste removed. You got your first little chunk out. Now you'll repeat the process. You'll come back to your starting point, okay? And then you adjust your stop. Come down and like halfway, just halfway between this stop and this stop. Don't go clear to the other stop, or like I said, you'll get those grooves, okay? If you're using a straight bit, it doesn't matter. But for this round nose bit, you got to take more incremental pieces. So that's what I do. Then you go down and then you cut it, okay? And then you do the same thing as we did before. Then you lower your plunge router again and again and again, and then you just keep repeating it until you get to the desired depth. I usually go all the way until my plunge is maxed out. That usually is a pretty good depth, okay? So now that I've kind of shown you how I like methodically do it, I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. All right, now you know how to set it up and use it. Go put it to work and make some cool cutting boards. If you didn't watch the first video yet on how to actually build one of these, go ahead and click over here. Please subscribe by clicking on my logo down here. And please follow me on my social media accounts if you want to see what I got going on in my personal life and in the shop. I post there very frequently. Thank you for watching. I truly appreciate you. God bless you.